So, good afternoon, and I'm certainly excited to be at this conference. I am not an academic, but I have real life experiences. 39 years ago, my life was changed forever in an expected way. I became a mother. Many parts of my mothering story are universal. Some experiences are unique. Then, 38 years ago, my life changed forever in an unexpected way. My second son, Nick, was born. He is delightful. He has special needs. His doctors diagnosed him as having Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. Lennox-Gastaut, or LGS, which most of us parents call it because Lennox-Gastaut is hard to, your tongue trips over that. It's a rare and severe type of epilepsy with a variety of seizures. It usually starts in childhood, and some children even have 100 to 150 seizures a day. So it's usually treated with a multiplicity of seizure medicines and other modalities, treatments, to try to control the seizures. Life expectancy is usually not long, and so Nick, being 38 years of age, some have said, oh, he's way outlived his life expectancy. It kind of makes me mad when they say that because I love having him, and anyways. So Nick's original diagnosis, because he was born a while ago, was developmental delay and then static encephalopathy, then a severe seizure disorder, as well as mental retardation, cerebral palsy, autistic tendencies, and high anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder. It was almost too much to say when someone said, what is wrong with your child? You know, it's much easier. I can just say, oh, he has Lennox-Gastaut. Well, no one knows what that is. But it's really a manifestation of all of those different things that has been discovered. So parenting a severely disabled child from birth to middle age is a transformational journey. And over the years, we and the parent groups that I've been involved with had discovered that this transformational process is common to parents. As we experience many difficult situations, we seem to go through the same stages. So that's what I'm wanting to present to you today, is the stages that we've discovered that are our transformational process. First, expectations. And we all have expectations. We've talked about some of those today. They're manifest in our frame of reference and our belief system. Well, my husband and I grew up in the same town outside of Seattle, Washington. We attended the same high school. We had different friends and different goals, and we're friends. A couple years later, we met again after school. We fell in love, and oh, it was glorious. We were going to be incredible. We talked for hours and hours about how amazing and incredible our life was going to be. Now, that's common to most people when they fall in love, isn't it? We knew we would be a good team. Our life together would be wonderful. Yet, within our youthful life vision of 4 children, a house with a white picket fence, and flowers gaily swaying in the breeze, we didn't include some of the realities of life. Not every checkbook balances. I'm an accountant, so I had to throw that in. Not every loaf of bread rises, and I love to bake. Not every child is born perfect. It is important that we evaluate our expectations, the realistic versus the unrealistic. And it's our life experiences that help us sift out the unrealistic and then cleave to the realistic. Secondly, we must ask ourselves if our expectations are cohesive versus conflicting. In other words, we learn to evaluate whether these expectations fit together well and form a united whole, or are they incompatible and clashing with one another. And again, experience gives us the opportunities to do these evaluations. It also is helpful to recognize what experiences influence our expectations. Initially, as a child, we have our familial expectations. These are the ones that are inherited from our family. From the beginning, in our own experience, our life was a whirlwind. Our first son, Ryan, was born 14 months after we were married. And we had taken everything. We'd taken every Lamaze class there was to take. We read every book there was to read. We practiced our breathing. We were ready. Both of our parents lived by. We knew we could handle anything that came along. Well, our life wasn't without conflict, however. Like any newly married couple, we struggled with money and trying to meld our 2 lifestyles together. We were so excited about our little family. Living in a small trailer with wall-to-wall furniture, a combination of parental hand-me-downs and secondhand finds, our life was complete. We didn't have a home with a white picket fence or 4 children, but we were working on it. And then life intervened. Next, we learned cultural expectations, and we've talked some about this. I've been really grateful for some of the seminars that we've already listened to today. I can't wait for the rest of the weekend. These cultural expectations are ancestral as well as societal. So many cultures are not as accepting of individuals that are different. From our first trip over here to Ireland, we were told that our Nick was a special angel. That was unique to us. The strangers here have been very kind, and this has not always been the case back home in the US. So in the intervening years, we bought a holiday home up in Donegal, and we love coming over here. It's Nick's favorite place to be. He loves it because the culture here is so accepting. Finally, we end up having our own personal expectations, and these emerge as we grow into maturity. These are our own ideas and our own value system. And as an example, one of my girlfriends was born in China and moved to America as a teenager. When her oldest son was born with severe cerebral palsy, her parents had very strong opinions about what should be done with this child. She and her husband opposed her parents and kept their son at home. Even now, years later, the grandparents still struggle with their relationship with their oldest grandchild, but they no longer reject him, so that's progress. The next step we found to educate parents is that they need education. So first of all, we explain to them this education happens when we learn from our experiences. We gain information, whether it's formally or informally, as we reach out through these experiences that we have. For instance, when Nick was 5 months old, my neighbor suggested that she and I join a mommy-baby swim class together. It was 8 weeks long, and I was really excited. Nick hadn't been diagnosed at that point, but I knew that there was something wrong with him at that point. So, because we still had to cradle his head like he was a newborn when he was 5 months old. So I thought, well, maybe going to this class will help strengthen his body. He couldn't reach out and grasp anything. His eyes wouldn't always follow things when we put it in front of him. And it was a difficult time for me. I felt like I was a failure as a mother. My husband tried to reassure me. Well, those swim classes represent a watershed moment for me personally. Not only was Nick uniquely different from the other babies, those other moms knew it. A separation had begun. They were open and friendly with me that first class. However, because I wasn't able to participate in their dressing room conversations about all of our babies' accomplishments, they didn't know what to say to me, and I didn't know what to say to them. Nick wasn't able to do the same thing as the other babies, and the teacher suggested that I just play with him out in the water while she was working with the other moms. So I went out into the deep end where I could lay him on my chest, floating back, and maneuver his little feet and legs up and down. I had heard that swimming helps stroke victims recover some and regain some of their physical abilities, and so that's what I did, just intuitively, something to help him. Later on, the physical therapist said that it was this swimming exercise that was the foundation for his nervous system and muscle development, which eventually led him to be able to weight bear and learn to walk, which is unusual with people that have Lennox-Gastaut. Most of them are completely wheelchair bound, so that was a plus. Even though Nick loved being in the water, I wasn't able to cope with the emotional stress of being in those classes. So at the end of the class, I told my husband I couldn't go back. Next, we tell the parents that in this process of education that they need to seek out resources. Typically, the first resource that they come in contact with is the professional resources, the doctors, therapists, nurses, counselors, teachers, and other educators. This can have both positive and negative impact. Negative experiences happen sometimes to parents, and yet even with that, we're teaching these parents these negative experiences can teach you things. You can learn from that. So let me tell you about my first experience with a doctor. June had come, and Nick was born in August, and he still couldn't do anything, and I was really super concerned at that point. So I called the local hospital, and I said, look, I need to get my son evaluated. I want him to see a pediatric neurologist. Well, the woman said, you can't just go and see a pediatric neurologist. You have to be referred by someone else. And I was like, okay, well, give me an appointment with whoever I need to so that I can get this referral. I just need this referral. So she made an appointment, and over that next week, me and my way that I do things, I was so concerned. I just make list after list after list that I was going to give the doctor about what my husband and my concerns were. It was a depressing list. So the day of the appointment arrived, and I thought, okay, now I'm going to get my answer. I've waited all these months. I know there's something wrong with my baby. And so I went to the appointment. So the three other moms that were in the room smiled at me, and the receptionist said, well, here's the registration forms, fill these out, and the nurse will take you back to the doctor really soon. So everything seemed really normal. That's a typical doctor's appointment, isn't it? I then sat down. Nick was on my lap. The questions began from the other moms. How old is your baby? Is it a boy or a girl? He's small for his age, isn't he? My kids were so huge. I think that this one has an ear infection. So what's wrong with your baby? What's wrong with my baby? How could I tell these perfect strangers what was wrong with my baby? I didn't know what was wrong with my baby. So as I was checking back the tears, I did say, I don't know. Well, they looked away embarrassed. Again, a separation. The wait felt like an eternity while I was waiting for the nurse. Finally, she called my name, gathering Nick up and all of the papers and the things. I just trotted down the hall after her. And we went into the room, and the customary dialogue began. What can we do for you today, Mrs. Gremmert? Well, it was difficult for me to answer. I merely said, his father and I are concerned that our Nicholas isn't developing correctly. He hasn't learned anything as quickly as his older brother did. We want him evaluated by this doctor so we can get a referral to a pediatric neurologist. She looked startled. She quickly weighed him and took his vitals, and she told me the doctor would be in shortly. Checking his chart, she quietly closed the door and muttered to herself, that baby isn't much bigger than his birth weight. Alone and confused, I waited for the doctor. Finally, after 20 long minutes, he came in. Without making any introductions, he said, so, you're worried, are you? Well, let me see. He didn't ask me any questions. Here are my notes and questions, I offered him. He glanced and said, just a minute, please, as if to keep me from interfering. I watched as he moved Nick's legs up and down, felt the top of his head, shone a light in his head, or in his eyes. The whole examination took about 3 minutes, which, during that whole time, he didn't say a word to me. He handed Nick back to me and said, I'll be back. I bit back my anger and frustration. He hadn't even looked at the notes that I brought in. When the doctor returned a few minutes later, he stood just inside the door, across the room from me. Raising one eyebrow, he interrogated me. How often during the day do you feed your baby? Every 3 hours or so, I replied. How long are these attempts? About 45 minutes. He cocked his head to one side. How else do you interact with your baby? Well, I try to play with him, but he just doesn't seem interested. After these few questions, I was feeling defensive. Does he think I'm neglecting my child? He didn't say anything for a few minutes, and then reaching for the door, he said, there's nothing wrong with this infant. His development is completely within the normal ranges, and I am not making referral to a pediatric neurologist. It would be a waste of their time. He looked directly at me and said, Mrs. Gremmert, if you don't stop comparing your second son to his older brother, your parenting will prove to handicap him. You need to immediately change your attitude, go home, and properly care for your son. I was devastated. I have since learned that this is a type of reaction that many parents get when searching for a diagnosis. I reached out to professionals expecting to receive answers and support, and they gave me exactly the opposite. In addition, they were completely wrong about their diagnosis. Up to then, I had completely trusted the medical professionals. Now, we have had incredible supportive experiences following this devastating one. We've learned how to work with professionals and educated ourselves so that our interactions have created the opportunities our son needed in his treatments and therapies. Also, we tell parents that they need to then seek community resources. And there's a lot of them out there. They've changed over the years, but at the time, we were introduced to the ARC of King County, which was a local nonprofit group. And now there's social clubs, community clubs, there's availability of research that's done at universities. There's a lot of more resources out there than there was, 35 years ago. The third resource that we tell parents to create for themselves is to network. They can network with other parents, neighbors, social media. Over the years, parents have gravitated together, but now with social media, I find it incredible because you can connect with people who live across the world, who understand exactly what you're going through, and communicate with them back and forth, and even have video chats with them, and so you really get to know them. Today, I feel like I have close friends all over the world. We laugh together and cry together, and we simultaneously teach and learn from one another. The next step that we found in this process is adaptation. We modify ourselves to be better suited to our changed circumstances. We have a new normal. What was previously abnormal is now commonplace. Stress, which has been mentioned a couple different times in this conference, I don't always think of stress as being a negative. It can give us the opportunity to react and to change. It can help us perform under pressure and can motivate us to do our best. We gain confidence. Our experience brings the conviction that we can navigate the new. We gain belief in our abilities. And from our presentations we give parents, we tell people that the final step in this process is integration. After evaluating our expectations, gaining education, and adapting our expectations, This is the process that makes us whole. Through self-evaluation, our expectations converge. Assumptions and beliefs, both old and new, come together and merge. And with this new path, we have practical strategies and plans are created. And in our journey now, we can meet the demands of everyday life and gain mastery over our lives. We have found that the outcome of this unexpected transformational process to be joy. We've gained awareness, situational awareness of self and of others, and we comprehend needs more readily. We have empathy, we have compassion for others, and we can be supportive. This is called the humanistic perspective. We experience empowerment, confidence that we can take control of our circumstances and advocate for ourselves as well as our children. And with this, we have personal growth. We have a self-determination to recognize and utilize resources to maximize the quality of our lives. And just one final story. When Nick had been in therapy for a few years, my friend Dora May approached me at church. She had noticed Nicky's progress and wondered what we were doing. She was a sweet, compassionate woman, about 15 years older than me. She was like a grandmother to me. And I wanted to be just like her when I grew up. Because she'd had a large family and 2 of her children had disabilities. Her oldest son had been oxygen deprived at birth, and her youngest son had Down syndrome. This man, Kay, was special. He was a few years older than my husband, and he loved my husband, and my husband loved him. Kay decided that Arden was his brother and asked his parents if they would adopt him. Well, Dorme told Kay that since Arden was married, I had to give my permission too, which I readily did. So Kay hand wrote up all the adoption papers and had everybody sign them, and so that Arden was officially his brother. Well, Dorme asked if she could visit Nick's school, Marywood, with me. She had known the 5 mothers of children with disabilities who had originally started the program back in 1962. And within a few years, it was incorporated, had gained public funding, gradually replaced the volunteers with paid professionals. The name had been changed to Marywood School. They now had innovative programming, including support for fathers, foster care. Is that me? Mm-hmm. All right, well, let me just finish the story if that's right. Child care and parent education. They'd gained the status as a neurodevelopmental center. On the way home from the visit, Dora May said, I really enjoyed coming with you and Nick today. It was wonderful to see the program that my friends have developed. You have so many services available for your kids with special needs. It really is incredible, Eva. Do you know that I believe that it has been an incredible blessing to me to have served my 2 boys over these years? I had never thought of that possibility. I drove down a freeway having my view of my current situation changed 180 degrees. She said, having a disabled child is not a tragedy, my dear. It is an amazing opportunity. I promise you that the day will come, probably years in the future, when you will recognize the changes in yourself. I did. My outlook on life has changed. My life goals are different. The things that I now feel are most worth, including the activities I choose to fill my life. I have greater empathy and compassion for others and have gained the ability to be calm in the face of adversity. You will see, it will happen to you. It was hard to envision, but as she spoke in her kind, gentle manner, I could catch a glimpse of what she believed to be true. Many years later, after she passed away, I realized that everything she told me that day had come true. And that is the message that I try to teach to the parents of young children, that joy is possible. Thank you for your time.